Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our first podcast of 2018. It's Todd and Shane's weekly cloud, SharePoint, whatever podcast. Episode number 371, recorded live Tuesday morning, January 9th, 2018. I, of course, am Todd. And who are you?
My name is Shane, and I am confused because we're here on a Tuesday, but other than that, I am ready and willing to do this show.
Yeah, so for the folks that don't listen to this live, we normally do this Monday afternoons, but then as life will do, Monday afternoons started getting busy, so we couldn't do it Monday afternoons anymore. So we're bumping it to Tuesday mornings, but not forever, because Tuesday mornings don't work real great for everybody. So we're going to bump it to Wednesday here in a couple of weeks. So we will, well, I guess we're going to talk about the production notes, but so the plan right now, we've tried to make it as confusing as possible. And so we're going to do this Tuesday mornings at 10 Central, 11 Eastern this week, next week, and the week after. And then the last week of January, the week of the 29th, we're going to try to move to Wednesday morning at 10 Central, 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, 4 Hawaiian, whatever that is out there, and try to stay at that one, but we'll see.
For at least a week or two, right?
Yeah, at least a week.
So the good news is no matter where the show gets moved to, you can always get me on Twitter at Shane's Cows, right? My Twitter is not changing, whether or not these shows do. So Always hit me up if you need me.
Yep. And I am at Todd Clint. You can email me, todd@toddclint.com. And if you get lost finding this podcast, you can always get it at toddclint.com/blog. I blog them. They're always there. We're on YouTube, youtube.com/toddclintnetcast. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different ways to get it. And if you're listening to the audio version of this, a couple of things about that. Number one, you don't get to enjoy my bad haircut. I've got the bed head going on today, and it's like that, messy hair, don't care sort of thing. You're missing out on that. And also, everything we talk about, all the links, all that stuff, you can go to toddclint.com/podcast371, and they will all be in there. So you can find all those links. And Sandy in the chat room mentioned that we'll be on, and then right after that, Laura will be doing her Power Hour. I'd forgotten about that. So just a good morning of free content.
Yeah, you don't need to do any actual work at work. Don't be like that Jack guy who left the show to go to a meeting, for goodness sakes.
I've honestly never liked that Jack guy, so it's that'll happen. But this is like training, so you can say, boss, I would love to work, but I'm spending 5% of my work week doing training. So we can do that. So going on to the topic, speaking of podcasts and all that, our last podcast, 370, was also our final podcast for 2017. I would say we went out with a bang. It was a pretty good one.
I mean, I looked great in the show, so I think it was a perfect show. Absolutely.
Once again, I think our audio-only viewers will not disagree with that. I think that's agreement across the board. But we kind of did. We normally do like an end-of-the-year thing, but that got kind of old and very very trite. And so we did something that both of us have done over the last year, and we get a lot of questions about, and that's cord cutting. And so if you missed the last podcast, first, shame on you, but you can catch it again on YouTube, or you can go to toddclint.com/podcast370, and that'll have all the links that you can download the MP3 or whatever. And it's just it's 73 minutes of us talking about our experiences with cord cutting. And we talk about the services that we've tried, the hardware we've used, the problems we've had, and all of that. It's been pretty popular.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of those ones, if you do watch it or listen to it or whatever way you consume it, we'd love some feedback, right? Because as I listened to the show the second time, I was like, man, I think we should have talked about X, Y, and Z here. We should have done this differently. But we haven't gotten that feedback from too many of the viewers.
Yeah.
We've gotten feedback that they've enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But if there's something you want to go different, or you want us to, go another rabbit hole, or you're like, hey, why did you do this? Or can you just make this simpler? You guys gave me too much information. We need that feedback to encourage us to make another show where we kind of go a different route with it.
Yeah, and a good place to put all that is YouTube. Because they've got all the, you can give thumbs up or thumbs up, comments and all that. So yeah, that's a good point, because I think this that particular topic changes very frequently. So we've gotten emails from people that said, this is great. When are you going to revisit it? Because 3 months from now, a lot of this information is going to be different. 6 months from now, it's going to be completely different. So like Shane said, the comments that you leave let us know, when we revisit this in 3 to 6 months, what things should we do better? So yeah, do that.
Yeah, and I would say that definitely you can tell the power of YouTube advertising. Right? I think that's number one we got was everyone's like, I want to use YouTube TV. Why don't you guys cover that? And our answer from both of us, I think, was to us, YouTube TV is not really a tangible thing yet, but in 3 months or in 6 months, it definitely is going to be. So we'll probably have to embrace that. So we'll see.
Yeah, and that's one thing I was just this morning. So our mutual friend Mike Fitzmaurice was talking about cord cutting, and he was talking about specifically the PSView service. He's like, I checked it out a few months ago. I didn't like it. Didn't have something. And my advice to him was, if you checked it out more than a month ago, your information's bad. The apps have changed. The services that the functionality of the service has changed. The channels the service has changed for the better or for the worse. So yeah, it's just something you have to keep on top of.
Yeah, especially the local channels that are picked up by PSView and DirecTV Now and all that, right? That's the whole reason I prefer PSView is it gives me the most local channels through the service. So it wins for me by default, but in a different market, you're going to see different local channels. So you just never know.
And it's funny how that is a defining feature. And for me, it was a big one too. Of all the things that have changed in technology and media and all that in the last 10 years, the last 20 years, the defining feature on which service you picked is the thing that existed 60 years ago. Over the air, the 3 main networks, so it's 4 or 5 now.
Yep.
But it's funny how that has it's like, we should quit using email. No, there's a reason that email is the preferred tool for communication and has been for 30 years. There's a reason for that.
Email's not going anywhere. Give it up, people.
No, it's not going anywhere. So if you like the cord cutting, go listen to that, toddclinton.com/podcast370, and let us know what you think.
Yeah. So keeping up with good news here, right?
Yeah.
That our good friend Bill Bear, right? Longtime listener of the show. Sometimes we let him in here. Most of the time we kind of keep him out, though. He's a troublemaker.
Yeah, very much so.
So over the holidays, though, he had a tweet. And so one of the most popular feature for all of you that are using Office 365, SharePoint Online, those type of things, is people have been wanting to be able to rename their tenant or rename their site collections within their tenants, right? We've been begging for it. It's been on user voice. It's been upvoted. I think Simon Cowell came in one time and even said, you're the next star.
Yep.
And so Bill hopped on user voice over the holiday and said, we're building your suggestion now. And there was much rejoicing.
But which suggestion? Because you mentioned 2. So before people get too excited, let them know which one it was.
I thought it was both.
Oh, so I thought it was just the site collection name, not the tenant name.
Oh man, now we both read it differently. This is a problem with non-official communication.
So he mentioned both, but I think he was just talking about while it might not be possible to change it so the entire custom domain are used, it might be possible to allow the subdomain to be changed.
Where are you reading that?
That's never mind.
So to that end, we are working on a solution to change the SharePoint domain URL. This capability will also then enable the renaming of an individual site collection.
You are correct, sir. You are.
See, Todd read the whole post. I only read the one paragraph that mattered. So that was it shows being a slacker. I guess paid off today. Todd, damn you and your thoroughness.
So we'll go back to. I have a funny story about that. So me and a couple of buddies have lunch every Wednesday, and so we're texting back and forth, group text. And so I text to one sent a text last Wednesday, and I'm like, hey, I got a thing at 1. Can we meet at 11:45? One of the guys responds back. The other guy does not. So the other guy shows up like a quarter after 12. I'm like, what the hell, dude? We've been sitting here for half an hour. I'm like, did you see my text about my meeting at 1? He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, why didn't you show up at 11:45? He's like, why? I'm like, did you read the entire text? I mean, it was like 2 sentences. He's like, well, I read the first one. I didn't read the second one. Oh my God. It was like 4 words later.
Hey, sometimes reading the whole thing's a lot of work.
So I've learned with him, the action part has to go first, and then the why I can, Oh, so yeah, this was the same thing. I read the entire thing. I should have just taken your route and read the end.
Yeah, and it's a lot like emails, right? I've learned, I used to send emails and I'd be like, all right, I got question A and question B. Question B never gets responded to, right? So you got to be like, all right, here's one email with question A. Here's a completely separate email with question B. And because it then becomes question A, that's the only way to get results from people, right? We can only handle one thing at a time. We're just not very smart.
No. So you are correct. So it looks like Bill's response is that they are working on making it able to rename the tenant. So the company A.SharePoint.com be able to change that to companyb.sharepoint.com without losing everything. Because in the past, and well, I guess as of still today, the guidance is if you need to change that, you need to build a new tenant, license a new tenant, and migrate all your stuff over. See, it's that easy.
Pain, no problem.
Yeah. And so they're looking at changing that. And then also, if you've got companya.sharepoint.com/sites/abc, looks like they're working on being able to change that to companya.sharepoint.com/sites/xyz. So you can rename just the site collection.
Pretty exciting stuff. Much rejoicing has taken place since he tweeted that and posted that.
Yeah. And so when I saw the site collection rename, I'm like, that's cool. That's good. I didn't catch the tenant rename. Yeah, that's a huge thing. The tenant rename. Holy cow. And that, while I have been dissing on them for not doing that for a long time, I recognize the technical complexities in the background because this is, it's a multi-tenant environment that's serving up SharePoint. It's a multi-tenant environment that's serving up Azure AD, all those things. So, I understand, I think, somewhat how all that interconnects. That's a complicated task. But that's awesome that they're going to do that.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting how does that trickle downstream to, some of the ancillary services like PowerApps, for example, right? So I go into PowerApps, I create a data source of contoso.sharepoint.com. And so when I change it to fabricam.contoso or .sharepoint.com, is PowerApps going to update? Do I have to go in and retouch all my apps, right? It'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of moving parts at this point that'll have to kind of be accounted. Flow, Power BI, I don't know. Be interesting.
Gig Jam, all those, yeah. So we'll keep an eye on that. Yeah, and hopefully, Bill wasn't just hitting the eggnog a little hard, something like that. But that's good stuff. That's awesome. So you've been busy over the holidays. Would you like to tell the folks a little bit about what you've been working on?
Well, sure. I know all those people at YouTube have nothing better to do than to flag my videos and be like, man, this is not safe for public consumption. So I made them some more videos. And the first video I made them was Introduction to PowerShell Variables. And I'm going to be honest, this was probably one of the toughest videos I made, right? Not because I'm not good with variables. I understand how variables, I use variables every day. I do suck at them, but I use them all the time. But there's just so many nooks and crannies and rabbit holes and different ways of using them. I really struggled on what to show people and what not to show people. And I don't know, I got done with the video and I was like, man, this video is terrible. But I put it out anyway.
Yeah, you're right. And I mock you because you're not very good at these things. But there is some validity to it when you're like, oh, variable, it's a thing that stores value. But there is so many things. Like I remember the look. I wish I could have seen the look on my face the first time I saw the $, paren, $. I'm like, what, the variable of that makes no sense. So yeah, there's just all kinds of crazy things around that.
Yeah, and then you get the variable commandlets, right? You don't use the $.
Yes. So that was, and I remember I was sitting in a Don Jones session once that helped me out with that. He's like, think of the $, as telling PowerShell, here comes a variable. Like the $, isn't part of the variable name. It's just telling PowerShell, perk up your ears. The next thing that comes is a variable name. And that helped frame that because I had the same problem. Clear variable $ foo, and it would error out. I'm like, ah.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I made the video. It was interesting, and I think you had a great note that I actually didn't bring up in the video because I stink. But what's your advice on when you're making variable names and things like that?
Well, it's not my advice. I stole it from Jeffrey Snover, which is why I threw it in the notes here. But he tweeted out a PSA that was write scripts as though you'll need to read them at 3 a.m. in a situation where if you get it wrong, you'll get fired. So I always when I do PowerShell, I have a very similar piece of advice, but I've probably not packaged it up as eloquently as him. But one of the tenets of doing PowerShell, kind of the next level thing, is to be the tool maker, not the tool user. And so I always tell people to write the scripts in such a way that the college intern can't get drunk enough to screw it up. That's because, we've all got the college interns that are working the late shifts and all that. So write the script in such a way that college intern can't get drunk enough that they can screw your script up. Have error checking in there. Have good variable name, parameter names and all that kind of stuff. Snover's advice is probably a little better put, I guess.
Man, seems a little clean, but yeah, I'm real bad about that, right? Those I use a lot of variables. I use cal. Cal is always my first variable. Pig is always my second variable. And while it works great for me, exactly that. The intern has no idea why are we trying to set the object type of cal.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I'm bad about that. I use a $I, $V, $A, B, C a lot. But when I put them out, I always do the find their place and replace them with better names. So check out that video. And it says here in our notes that you've made yet another video.
Well, I wanted to, like I said, those YouTube guys, they need jobs. They need videos to flag.
Well, they're working hard.
So I only made one that's going to make poor Jeff Hicks sad. So Jeff's going to go watch the PowerShell variables one and probably never speak to me again. I apologize. But so then I also sit down. So I'm writing a bunch of white papers around PowerApps for different scenarios. I think we talked about before, right? For the InfoPath scenario, the Access Web App scenario, and the Excel scenarios. And so when I finished the Excel one, I sat down real quick and I made a PowerApps for Excel spreadsheets hosted in OneDrive for Business. Buzzword bingo.
Wow, that does. Yeah, I have that all the way across.
See? But so I made a video there, and it really is, it's just kind of how to make your first Power App that is based on an Excel data source. There's just a couple little things I want to make sure I covered, things like the Excel data has to be in a table, your Excel spreadsheet has to be shared with with everyone. And then I just kind of show them some little tips and tricks to wet their whistle and get them excited about doing a Power App for a front end in their Excel.
Excellent. We'll go check that one out. Those are on your YouTube channel, I assume.
They're always out there, good old Shane Young Cloud. So check them out. Tell YouTube that they are not pornography laced or whatever it is they think I do in these videos, and it'll be okay.
Yeah, for those of you that haven't been following this saga, for the most part now, every video that gets uploaded to YouTube gets flagged as having questionable content for advertisers. And so we don't get any advertising revenue on it. So you have to go in and you have to every single time request a review. And then it takes some amount of time to get that review. And in the time people watch it between when you published it and when they clear it, you don't get any ad revenue. Kind of stinks.
Yeah, and especially because it happens at the beginning, right? And that's when all your subscribers watch. I realize you don't have any subscribers, but for those of us with, a bunch of subscribers, we miss a lot.
My subscribers are the best.
Yeah, your mom does a good job of clicking as many windows as possible. I agree.
My mom is retired. She's got a lot of time on her hands. She can click a lot of windows. God bless her.
We need to teach our kids to do it. They watch so many YouTubes. Why can't they watch our stuff?
My middle daughter absolutely watches every episode that we do. She absolutely does. She is subscribed to the channel and regurgitates things that we talk about in here. Absolutely.
Oh, Penny. Hi.
True story. She does it all the time. Hey, Penny, shout out. Love you the best. Love you the most.
Your daddy's favorite.
Yeah,
I'll tell your brother and sister.
That's why you're daddy's favorite. All right. So in less happy news, but something as a tech podcasters, tech bloggers and all that, we would be remiss to not talk about this. It has been like the biggest story in tech news for the last couple of weeks. And this is this processor exploit called Meltdown and Spectre, I guess is kind of, there's two of them. So it's been all over. It's kind of been inundating. But here's how you know whether this applies to you or not. This exploit exploits processors from Intel, AMD, and ARM. So that is every processor around you.
Yeah.
It exploits a few OSs, Windows, every version of Windows, Mac OS, every version of Mac OS, Linux, every version of Linux, Chrome OS, every version of that, your microwave, your dishwasher, your refrigerator, they're all plotting against you and spying on you. I'm sure they're all exploited by that. So if you use any of those, then yes, you are probably subject to this. As for the hardware itself, this maybe find out if any of this impacts you. It impacts physical boxes like the Dell box I've got running Windows 10 here that's doing the podcast. That is impacted by it. VMs, so if you've got VMs running, they can be exploited by this. Hypervisors, the guests and the host, pretty much everything with an on off switch, with one exception that I'll talk about later, is vulnerable to this. Excuse me. So what is this? What is the thing? Now that I've made it sound even worse than it is. Oh, and even browser plugins. That was another fun one. So they're even like browser plugins inside of like Chrome or whatever can exploit this. So basically what is going on is CPUs have, we have all got multi-threaded CPUs. They've essentially hit the speed limit of a single processor at, 3 gigahertz or so. And so now we're going wide instead of tall. And one of the many tricks that CPUs use to go faster is this idea of speculation and figuring out things out of order. And some bad guys have figured out a way to exploit the speculative nature of that and the prediction aspect of that to cause faults. And when the fault happens, they get information from parts of the RAM that they shouldn't get, the kernel, things like that. That's a really short explanation. It's much more complicated than that. So any modern processor that uses any of those things is exploitable with this. So everybody is patching everything everywhere because this is out. Everybody knows about it now. And so today's Patch Tuesday. So there's going to be, if you haven't already gotten the out-of-band patch for Windows, you're going to be getting patches for that. So know that that's an important thing. And everything in these patches they're important. The bad guys are doing it. The bad news about the patch, not only is it getting, it's going to cause reboots and all that kind of stuff, it's going to slow everything down. Some estimates I've seen are up to 30%. And there's just nothing to do about that because this feature that they're exploiting is a speed thing. And so taking that out, they're trying to disable that. It's going to make things slower.
Yeah, it's, excuse me. It's interesting, and I guess it sounds like some of the early returns have been that the speed thing has not been as much of a problem as they were expecting. I guess, mathematically it could be up to 30%, but sounds like real world it hasn't come that bad. So that'll be interesting to see how that pans itself out. One of the things I was looking at with all this, right, because it's kind of, when it came out first, it was like it was all Intel's fault. Intel's going to end the world. And Intel stock hasn't taken much of a hit for it, so I thought that was interesting. And now it sounds like it's kind of turns out that it's pretty much all the processor architecture, so it's not just an Intel thing. So I don't know. It'll be a lot of interesting. And I got the out of band patch last week, and with mine, I'd like to tell you that I noticed a difference in performance or any of that, but really, as we talked about earlier before the show started, ever since I got the fall creator update, I have my machine's been a hot mess. I can't really tell if it's made it any worse or better or anything.
Yeah, I've gotten on a couple of boxes. I haven't noticed anything either. I was reading an Ars Technica article this morning about it, and with some of the older AMD processors, apparently it just causes blue screens. Like stuff just crashes. It just, yeah.
Oh, now that you mention, I did see an article that said they had stopped rolling the patch out. Microsoft had stopped with the patching for the moment because they were trying to figure that issue out. I did just see that this morning now that you mention it. And
this is that classic struggle between patching something quickly because the bad guys are using it and testing a patch thoroughly before you push it out. That's really tough. And so that's coming out. Be aware. Know that the bad guys are doing it already. And so I've got a couple of links. The one is a Business Insider article that kind of explains it. So again, to reiterate this impacts for our audience, it impacts Windows Server, all of them forever. It impacts Azure, both the machines that you're running in Azure and Azure itself, the hypervisors running Azure, every machine in Azure. So there have been, so now it's important to know your failover groups and your upgrade groups and your availability sets. Now is a good time to study all that because this is where this stuff comes in. So everybody is vulnerable.
Now, has it been in the wild yet? I thought it was still just an academic exploit. Is there a virus running around that's actually doing bad things with it?
I thought I had read about some Chrome plugins that had, but the explanation's out. So the issue becomes with these is when the Linux patches come out, the bad guys can start reverse engineering what the Linux patch does, and then they're like, oh. And I've seen some pretty thorough explanations of the problem, which makes me think the bad guys could have enough information now.
Well, I'm sure the NSA is already using it, right? I mean,
well, they've been using it for years, and they're probably all very upset right now because now they have to find a new way to get in.
Yes.
So I mentioned that there is one group of things that is not vulnerable to this, which is something I had never even worried about, but it's funny that they mentioned it. My beloved Raspberry Pis. Fortunately, this little $30 beauty here, because it is so cheap and the performance is so poor, the processor that it has does not have this speculation feature, so therefore cannot be exploited. So that's funny because, I mean, it's funny, but also the Raspberry Pi Foundation put out an explanation of this particular exploit. They could have just said, don't worry, we're not patching our stuff and you're fine. We're not, but they go through a really great job of explaining it like for children. So there's like, the whole subreddit explained to me like I'm 5, blah, blah, blah. This is the Raspberry Pi Foundation's explanation of this is the explain it to me like I'm 5. So it was really good. I like that.
So is my calculator watch exploitable, or is it the same as your Pi?
I have no idea. I assume, and unless I'm told otherwise, I assume my watch is also listening in on us. But this is, I mean, and it's funny because all of these big exploits that have come out recently have been huge and huger, and you can get kind of exhausted by it. But this is a big one. This is every machine ever, running every OS ever. I mean, it's all of them.
It's always something to do, right?
Yep. So if you see those patches, put them on sooner rather than later. Test them when you can. But this is the real deal. This is one you should check out.
Yeah. So you were talking about the with the Azure and the availability sets and all those fun words, and it sounds like you're a little more well versed than you've been recently. You've been studying up a little.
A little bit. So was looking at a gig and an opportunity that I thought it'd be a pretty good fit for, and because it was all, evangelism and talking about technology, but a big part of it was Azure. And so I talked to these folks, and I haven't found out whether I'm going to get this gig or not, but I went into that not knowing enough Azure and feeling a little embarrassed about that and realizing that, man, in 2018, I just don't have any excuse to not know Azure well. Yeah, I'm a SharePoint guy and I'm an Office 365 guy, but Azure's where it's all going. And so I've promised myself that I will take some Azure exams, not to prove any proficiency in Azure, because that's obviously exactly the opposite of the case. But studying for exams always forces you to look at technologies you don't always look at, and look at them in a big way. Because I've always thought of exams as marketing material. I've always thought of those as a way for Microsoft to push the pieces of technology they want you to know about.
Yep.
And so I have started on my checklist for my New Year's resolution for 2018 is to pass at least one Azure exam. So I've got I got my eye on exam 7533, which is implementing Microsoft Azure infrastructure solutions. And it talks about all of that, one VM, two VMs, failovers, all those kind of things. And so I've started doing that already, been started reading up on that. I've got a number of resources that I've been using on that. And if anybody else is looking at doing that exam, let me know. I can do some helping like I did with the Office 365 one. We can talk about that a little bit. But I think for all of us, I mean, it's just something, whether I get this gig or not, I need to know this Azure stuff and I need to keep up on it. So I'm doing it.
There you go. I'm liking your New Year's resolution. You're not going to get fit. You're not going to eat better. You're not going to drink less. You're going to learn some Azure.
I have no illusions about any of those things. Yeah, I'm not going to. Nah.
Fair enough.
Though I will say the gym has been very crowded the last week.
Now until spring break, right? And as soon as spring break happens, it goes right back to empty the way you like it.
Well, I was thinking February 1st, Groundhog Day, but we'll see. So I think that's just good advice for anybody out there who works in this field. Azure's the future. That's where it's going. So I don't want to be. I'm embarrassed I'm as behind as I am.
Yeah, well. Sorry, I was going to go somewhere with that, and I let it go.
This is not the After Dark.
Exactly. So I did have the good fortune of just the other night sat down. There was a big SpaceX launch. I'm sure you all kept up with that because they're always exciting. And it happened. They went live at 8:00, and so I just hopped on Facebook Live and watched it with my kids. And my kids were really, really kind of intrigued. I instantly intrigued by it. It's the first time I'd ever shown anything like that to them. So just kind of a reminder, SpaceX is really cool because Elon is cool and he makes Tesla. But it's just a good way sometimes, just those little things. I think all in it was about 15 minutes from launch to landing back on that platform. probably less than 15 minutes. They have a nice commentator, and it was good. So I would recommend you guys embrace that and watch it with your kids if you want to try and get them a little more interested in science and that type of stuff.
Yeah, so I, follow the SpaceX stuff tangentially. I'm not a nerd like, AC and CJ are about all that stuff.
Right.
But I saw a bunch of people posting about doing this, and I wish I'd have done it. I wish I'd have sat my kids down and made them watch this. And, we're old enough that we've seen the space program. It's always been there, but we've seen some stuff. I am still, to this day, amazed that they launch rockets into space and then bring them back down and land them on a platform. That is just amazing. That is just amazing that happens. So, yeah, I might go find that video and make my kids watch it, even though it's not live.
Well, the other fun thing with this one, right? So now we can put on our aluminum hats. So this was the one where they launched the satellite Zuma, and there was really no details, right? We're not telling you what it is. We're not telling anything. Somebody finally figured out that Northrop Grumman, whatever those guys are, were the ones that were paying for it, and so they kind of had to admit to that portion. But so they launched this rocket, right? Everything was successful. We watched it land. Yay! We went to bed. And they didn't do any of the stage 2 stuff. They're like, yeah, not going to show you any of that, due to the nature of this launch. And so the next morning they come out, they're like, oh yeah, the stage 2, it blew up. It was unsuccessful. No secret spy satellite was put into space. And I don't know. I'm just not the believer type. I'm like, I think that's exactly what I would say if I wanted to put a satellite up there and see what would happen. I would be like, yeah, it failed. So I don't know.
Darn this luck. Darn the luck. The spy satellite, we weren't able to put in place. Nothing to see here. Yep. And that's Northrop Grumman, for those of you that couldn't understand the marbles in Shane's mouth when he was trying to say that.
People named Shane are from the South. We don't say words like Northrop Grumman. I can't even say. I mean, I'm reading it off the screen, and it doesn't help any. Might as well just say NG. NG was the OG who put the satellite in space.
Or Tuesday, or Poem, or Orange.
Orange.
So in other Elon-related news, I have an Elon tangential story as well. We're all Tesla nerds here on this. One of us actually owns one. And yesterday, there's a guy who's driving cross-country. He got a brand new Model 3. And he's driving cross-country and just letting people drive his Model 3, and he's going to the superchargers and letting people take pictures and sit in it and touch it and all that. And he stopped in Des Moines yesterday. So I went down and did that, and it was kind of cool. So I got to see a Tesla Model 3 in person. I got to ride in it, got to drive it, and that was a lot of fun. So that guy, his name is Yo-Yo something. I forget what his last name is, but it was funny. And Tom Resing, who's been a friend of ours for 100 years, SharePoint guy, works at Microsoft now, brought up an interesting point. And it's funny, I don't think he meant to bring it up the way it was, but Tesla has more than 400,000 people who have these cars on reserve, and they are monumentally behind in manufacturing them. So the big launch event for this vehicle was March 31st, 2016. And that's when everybody reserved theirs. 400,000 people within a week of that event reserved a vehicle nearly 2 years ago. And nearly nobody has the vehicle yet. I think they put out 10,000 of them, something like that. So I am looking, so I will wait. I've got one on reserve. I put it on reserve that day before the event. I will wait at least 2 years for my vehicle. And so because of the pent-up demand, Tesla has done nothing to promote the vehicle. They don't have any in the showrooms. You can't take them for test drives. They don't have to because they have 400,000 people waiting to buy them with no marketing. So if you want to test drive a Model 3 Tesla, you can't from Tesla. And so this guy is driving across the country, and that's how I got to drive one, is because of this guy. And Tom was like, well, it's amazing that the company itself doesn't do this, that you got to get it from somebody else. And I'm thinking, to somebody in the SharePoint community, this should not be a surprise because the SharePoint community has done that thing forever for SharePoint. If Microsoft didn't build something or didn't support something or didn't, it was always the community that stepped up. The Tesla community is very similar in that manner. So this guy has had this car for 16 days. So 2 weeks and 2 days, well, 17 days now. It was 2 weeks and 2 days yesterday. He has spent the entire time he has had that car driving across the country, letting other people molest his brand new car. He's put over 9,000 miles on this car in 16 days. And it's all because he's given back to the community. So that's pretty cool.
it's exciting stuff, right? I mean, it just shows you the passion that they have, or that people have for this new way of doing things, right?
Yeah.
It's not a big old internal combustion engine showing up. We call those ICEs.
Yep.
It's not going to the gas station. It's not what are all these features? It's just a nice little dash or what do you call it? A screen like an
Yeah.
iPad essentially. You run the whole thing off of. So, and there's just a lot of people are excited. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so I've got the 3 on reserve. There are pieces of the 3 that I don't like much, and part of it is the fact that there is no dashboard and there is just a big screen in the middle. I don't like that, and that was one of the things, like that was almost a deal breaker for me. I'm like, I don't know. But the thing is, a bunch of people are buying these vehicles sight unseen, like they've never actually sat in one, and they're going to fork out, $50,000, $60,000 for this car. My experience with that was I went into that thinking I hate the center screen only approach.
Yep.
And about 3 minutes into the test drive, I didn't even notice anymore. It just didn't even bother me. The speed is in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, so it's as close to where it would be normally as possible because they're up like that. And the other thing is, when the speed is not there, I realize that I check my speed a lot for no reason because, like, if I'm in traffic, it doesn't matter what the number is. I have to be driving in a manner that is consistent with the traffic around me. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's less of a big deal than I thought it was going to be. Now, there's a bunch of UI stuff that's clunky as hell. Setting the cruise control and all that's like 17 clicks on a touch screen, and it's horrible. But they can fix all that because they can do over-the-air updates, so they can fix all those things.
Also, the cruise control wasn't the little paddle down the bottom?
No, so the paddles are all different than the Model S, and yeah, the cruise control stuff itself is different. So Sandy in the chat room is asking, by the time the car becomes available, won't the tech be outdated? Well, that's the thing. So there are 2 sides of this. There's the hardware and there's the software. And our country has some really weird protectionist laws around car dealerships. It is illegal for companies like Ford to update things on their vehicle. For Ford, the company, to update things on the Ford vehicles over the air. They have to have the dealerships do it. There's laws around that. But Tesla doesn't have dealerships, so they don't have to worry about that. So Tesla owners get updates, once a month, Shane? Something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so software updates, that tech won't get outdated because it is constantly updated over the phone network, happens as frequently as Tesla wants to do it. The hardware, yep, that can get outdated. They are not doing a horrible job with that. The Model S has been out for, 5.5 years now? 2012 was the first year for those. The original ones of those are still going. They don't do all the cool stuff. They don't have autopilot. They don't have all those things, but they still run. So,
yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because, I mean, you explained that perfectly. And when it comes to those updates, you're thinking, what are they going to do? Change the screen? Like I posted a video of the whole, you could do Santa. You could have Santa show up as your car, one of the holiday Easter eggs, right? So those are fun. Those are clever, but not a big deal. But the last update I got about 3 or 4 days ago, actually, was rain sensing wipers, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, wait a minute, how would you do that? Well, it turns out that one of their super smart engineers figured out how to take the autopilot camera and see the rain on the windshield and then have the wipers go on and off, right? So that's a pretty major new piece of functionality that I just got over the air one morning. I literally just came out and the car's like, hey, I updated at 2 a.m. last night. Oh, here's all these new features you got. And so that's just not like any other car you've ever had before. Right? It's wild.
Yeah, and so the UI on the Model 3, there's a bunch of stuff that's just not there yet and a bunch of stuff that's in dumb places. But yeah, once a month, these folks are going to get updates and, they listen to feedback. Elon is amazing at doing one of 2 things, or maybe doing them both. Number 1, listening to people's feedback and saying, yes, we're going to make that happen. Or having the roadmap of things they're going to do and then finding people to complain about the things they were already going to do and say, we listened to you, we're going to do that thing when they were going to do it anyway, but makes the community feel like an important part of it. So yeah, a bunch of those things. And the rain sensing wipers is funny because I have had automatic rain sensing wipers on cars for 15 years now. And previous versions of the Tesla had it, but they had the actual sensor like my Ford does. But the new one doesn't have that sensor, so they had to find another way. And yeah, the guy did it with camera.
That's like you said, the fear.
So here's another extension of that. So one of the bugs that has on the Autopilot 2 Teslas is apparently there's a situation where you can open the door and get in the car and the windshield wiper can go at the same time and splash you. So when you're standing there right in that crook, it can happen to come up. So that was something that they fought with the earlier versions, but again, different software, different hardware. But that happens now. It's a legitimate thing. They can just patch it. They can just fix it. And next month, they won't do that anymore. Next month, they will put some logic in there and says, if driver's door open, don't wipe the windshield wipers. It's fixed. It's done.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So the Model 3, I'm pretty excited. If I get the version that I want with the dual motors, the all-wheel drive version, I probably have to wait till this fall to get it. So we'll see if that's important or not to me. But good times. If the whole Tesla and battery electric vehicle stuff is something you're interested in, we could probably do a show about that too.
We could do a lot of content on that if that was something people wanted.
All right. So last minute, do your last little item down there, and
so with all the crazy cold that we've had here in the last month, right? Depending on where you're at in the country or in the world, but for us here anyway, we've had a lot of cold. Found a new weather app. It's called WTForecast. And, in case you didn't notice, forecast starts with the letter F. It is my favorite new app because it gives you the weather just the same way, right? It uses one of the weather feeds of the other guys, but it puts it all into context, and it has it expresses how you might feel about the weather. So it is not a friendly for the show thing, but if you're into inappropriate things like you wish we did the After Dark show, you would really enjoy this weather app. It's called WTForecast, and then you can go in and you can set the modes to mild bad words or lots of bad words. So you can pick what level of information you want.
Yeah. So this is one of those things like being a vegan or doing CrossFit or whatever. If you have any friends that have WTForecast, you know about it because they post every WTForecast screenshot on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. So I don't have to load it because I have friends that have it. And so I can just get it through my social media feeds. But yes, it is not safe for work, but it is funny. If you're ever frustrated about the extreme weather, hot, cold, rainy, whatever, the WTForecasts will crystallize your thoughts on that eloquently or uneloquently. But
kudos to them.
It's pretty funny. And that's one of those things like, the people. So the big thing is just the little, the little quips that they have. It's a bunch of 20-somethings that have never worked in like a rigid office before, that have no restraints on what they can say or do. And yeah, it's funny.
Very, very Cards Against Humanity-esque, right?
Oh, yeah.
Just things you're like, how did you even come up with a combination of words? I like them, but I don't even know where you came up with that. So
yep, I would love to say some of my favorites on here, but we can't.
Exactly.
But yeah, WTForecast. Yes, a good addition to any mobile device.
There you go. All right, so shameless promotions, Todd. How would you like to promote?
Let's do it. So the first thing, we are 2 weeks away from my birthday, which means we have 2 weeks left in the birthday charity drive. Every year between Lori's birthday and my birthday, we raise money for charity. The thing here is I don't care what charity you give to. I have no charities that I'm promoting. I don't care. I just want you to give to a charity that is important to you. And when you do it, go to Lori's website, pointgowan.com/TKCharity, and put a little thing in there. We'll tally it all up. We'll clap for ourselves at the end. We'll pat ourselves on the back. I'm working on the lovely Mrs. Clint, and we will see about matching. Every year I match what you guys do, so we tally it all up. Last year was like $4,000 something. I put some money towards charity, $4,000 worth. Looking to do that, but again, we're getting up in real numbers here, so it gets a little tough for me to do, but I think we'll be able to work that. I think I can talk her into that. We're pretty charitable folks. So again, go to pointgowan.com/TKCharity if you've given to any charities since December 11th, and we'll tally it all up, and we'll talk about that here in a couple of weeks.
Very exciting. So then once you've done that, then you can start planning your trip to Vegas in May, right?
Yeah.
May 21st through 23rd, the SharePoint North America Conference is back. Yes, we got a SharePoint conference again. We are excited to do it. Todd and I will be doing some day session or a day-long session on Thursday after the show, all on administration stuff. We're hoping to do some sessions sprinkled throughout the week. We'll just be there for hugs and kisses if that's kind of your thing. we're excited to go back to Vegas and do some SharePointing.
Yeah, so go out to SharePointNA.com, sign up for that. It is going to be the SharePoint thing. I've been getting emails and LinkedIn's and all that about stuff that's going to be out there. Everybody's going to be there. If you do SharePoint, Office 365, whatever, you need to go that. And I'm going to call an audible here because it's something I saw on Twitter. There's a lot of user groups out there that are looking for speakers. One of the toughest parts of running a user group is finding content and finding speakers. And in the last couple of days, I've seen some calls out for people who are looking for speakers to do it remotely. Shane's done it a bunch of times. I've done it a bunch of times. It's a thing. So if you have a user group that does SharePoint, Office 365, whatever, and you would like me to promote that and try to get speakers to come in, shoot me an email, todd@toddclint.com. Hit me up on Twitter @toddclint. And, in the next couple of podcasts, we'll get that out there. If you are a listener to this podcast and don't have a user group, this is a great way to start doing that. It's a great way to talk about things that you're doing. And it's okay if you're not a polished speaker. Shane and I aren't. We do it all the time. People, you know more about something than somebody else does. Somebody can learn something from you. So don't hoard all that knowledge. Go out there. This is a great way to get your feet wet in a very friendly environment. So if you need speakers, let me know and we will talk about that. And if you want to speak at them, I encourage you to take these people up on their offers.
Very exciting. Well put. Well put. Let's do that.
All right, folks, we're calling it 45 minutes. We're out again next week, the live show, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, and then we'll go from there. We'll be in the chat room for a little bit longer, but we will see you next week.
Toodles.